Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Motivation and That. I'm Natalie, I'm your host, and I get to have two guests on today, a first for the pod, but it's necessary because of the topic we are jumping into, and I couldn't ask for better people for social media to connect together to make this session possible. And it's going to be a heavier conversation for some. For others, it's probably going to feel like relief. For others, this is just an educational moment to really learn and hear and explore a topic. And that topic is grief. It is one that is near and dear to my heart, one that I'm still navigating through even after 20 plus years from my first major loss that I went through. And I'm really glad to have a safe space with two individuals that are doing this conversation regularly. And that's Jessica and Elizabeth, who make up the Grieving Sisters and their podcast, which focuses on all of the components of grief. And when I say all, there's like a list because I pulled the description up and I was like, I hadn't even thought about those pieces. But going through, both of you have had loss of siblings. We'll talk about that in a second. But exploring grief, including spiritual aspects, cultural aspects, legal aspects associated, and aiming to provide a compassionate connection and healing space. And it is beautiful. I couldn't think of another way to kind of summarize all of the icky and pretty and yet like weird components of what that journey is like. So without further ado, Jessica, Elizabeth, thank you for making some time to sit here today to talk about grief and all of its complexities. I'd love to hear a little bit from you both on kind of how you landed here, why this is passionate, and how the Grieving Sisters podcast even came to be in the first place. Jessica, can we start with you?
So with Liz and I, we were childhood friends since the fifth grade. And our siblings knew each other. We always played with each other. We went out, we always had pizza, we went to Sam's and got candy, and we always stayed in touch, Liz and I, like either via social media thing. I'm always grateful for social media, right? That's like one of the positive aspects. But um, I had lost my brother tragically 7 years ago, and it was on my dad's birthday. So we were just celebrating my dad's birthday, and then he passes. Then my dad passed in 2024, 2 days before Liz's sister passed. So I'm sitting here trying to get all the stuff together for my dad. I'm in between clients and I open it up and it said like rest in peace, Natalie. And I'm like, and it wasn't Elizabeth posting it. So I was like, nah, I don't know what they're talking about. I'm gonna ignore this. Um, and I mean, Liz, then you can jump in on that.
Yeah. So, like Jess said, we have been friends since we were maybe 9 years old, 8 years old, and our siblings were a big, 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 big part of our lives, even into adulthood. And Jessica had the loss of her brother tragically 1 minute to the next, and then her father passed away 2 days before my sister, and we ended up connecting. Me and Jess are both the people who are planning everything, the funerals, the everything that has to do with our loved ones. And we connected on that. And then soon after, Jess was like, I have an idea. I'm not sure if it's too soon. You've only been grieving for like 4 months, but I have this idea for a podcast. And like, I don't know if you found any big support when it comes to siblings, but I didn't see that. And I see the same thing. I'm like, I don't see that space. I see that there's a lot of spaces for parents for grieving, like if you're grieving somebody who was sick like cancer, or um people who have lost children or miscarriages or things like that. But for the sibling space, it's a little bit more complex because a lot of siblings are close or aren't close or strange and things like that. And like we've quoted so many times, sibling grief is the one death in your life that people say, were you close? Because they
Like they
kind of want
gauge
to
it.
they wanna gauge, like, how much empathy they should have for you, and, Jess really came up with this podcast, and I was on TikTok sharing my grief journey because I had connected with a couple other people who had lost siblings, just trying to find a space for support, and this just grew. It grew into, like, this really beautiful, um, community of honesty and really just, like, a safe space. We just wanted to create a safe space for other people who were dealing with all sorts of grief because,
Right. We
death
talk
is
about everything.
Yeah, Jess
Mhm.
has dealt with like a loss of a parent, a loss of a sibling. I've dealt with loss of a sibling. My engagement ended 3 days after my sister was in the ground, So it was like we had all grief of a relationship. I had lost my job soon after that. We had so many aspects of grief that came up that we said, we really want to be a podcast that can be a safe space for siblings, but also like this is how you have to deal with grief in a healthy way. And you can use these tools in any part of your life, because we always say, like, if you're not grieving somebody, it's just not your time yet.
Mhm.
It's
Right.
gonna happen.
And you're always going to grieve something, right? Like you're grieving the loss of a job, you're grieving a loss of a
Mhm.
friend. Like we even have that, we have that topic, we haven't even jumped into that. Like we have
Right.
still like an abundance of topics to talk about. And like we're always going to grieve something, right? But it's always going to go back to the one that impacted you the most. And I
Right.
always
Mhm.
feel like, obviously, for Liz and I, it would be our siblings. For you, it's, like even your dad and other things that you've shared with us, you know, it's still a reminder that you can still find the joy in grief.
And as you guys have had these conversations, so obviously with each other, you have this linkage of you both lost siblings, you both lost them suddenly on,
Right.
in that sense. But you talk to such a variety of people who have gone through all different, as you said, kinds of losses. And I think in a world where we may be trying to very much hold on to our journey or understand what our loss has been, what are some of the themes that you have seen in everyone as they're going through this process? We all know the stages of grief, but
Right.
in a sense of I've been through that too, or I felt that too, even though my situation was much different or, doesn't fall into the same category as yours. I'm sure you've seen a few of those.
Think for me, I've understood that anger was a very big part of loss. But at times for myself, it was hard for me to name it. I kept saying like I'm overwhelmed or I can't focus and I'm frustrated. But what I did realize is I've have been very, very, very angry. It went from shock to anger, and with like
Mhm.
these levels of sadness. And I think two guests in particular come to mind for me. One who was dealing with the loss of a suicide from her husband, and one
Oh,
recently, yeah,
Rashmani, yeah.
and then one recently we had bereavement, which is two men, one that was dealing with the loss of a spouse, but the other one, Q, he was dealing with the loss of his son who was 20 years old and died due to COVID. And he just has all this pent up anger. And it's interesting because when you meet him, Jess, you can attest to that. He has a great personality. He's a laughable guy. And
He's a
I
Libra, that's why,
yeah,
duh.
and I feel the same way. I feel like, that type of way. But when he was like, I've been really angry. I've been like telling people off. And I'm like, I've been sending everybody to hell for the past year? So it's like, that's kind of what I did realize is like, a lot of people are very angry, but they're not going to show it. And you can say, hey, that person is a very angry person for the grief that they're dealing with. But most of the time, you're not going to see it. So I think it's really taught me to have a bit of empathy as well. That, don't always expect sadness from somebody who's grieving. They might seem perfectly fine in themselves and then go into like these like pits of anger. Um, so I'm working on that, and it's kind of teaching me also to have empathy for others. I'm just if you want to take it from here, I'll let you.
Yeah, I feel with me with some of the guests, you know, again, Liz and I are in two, like, sure, it's parallel, right? But we're also in two different
Stages.
levels. Yeah, two different stages of grief. Like I went through the anger part. I've been through the, just the whole thing, right?
Mhm.
And just finding the purpose in the pain. And I think there's been so many people who we have connected with, and some of the stuff that we also research is where they are with their awareness and where they are in their awakening. So for me, it was an awakening. And I had to figure that out, whether it was spiritually, um, you know, why did this happen? Right. So it was anger, but it was switching over to curiosity, and it was switching over to Well, I want to know more. I'm going to go dig more. Who is God? Who did this to my brother? Why would you want to do that? What are you trying to show me? What lesson am I trying to learn? So just being in that reflective state. And I think, I think Rashmani, she was one that was just like very reflective, and her writing is, I mean, it's out of control. Her writing, she is absolutely, she's an excellent writer, and she knows how to convey her emotions, and she does it very well with her children too. Um, I mean, but there was just so many guests that I was like, wow, like, look, we had a medium on there. Liz, that's not a part of her faith, and she was like, but you know what? I know it's a part of what people look for in answers. And I was like, okay. So I told Michelle, I'm like, hey girl, I'm open. Like, Lisbeth's not open. Lisbeth says she's not open. She goes, and that's the issue when they say that they're not open to it. That's when they start knocking. So when she lost her, she was on another podcast, and she explained it a little bit more in depth, how she was like, that she was in the broom closet like a witch. And her mom was like, no, 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 like, you're not doing this. But then after her mom passed, like, she started to get more into her purpose
Right.
and using her gifts to help people. So, like, things like that, so it's like, okay, well, I can definitely understand that, like, now you want to take this and help other people. I said, this is one of the reasons why the Grieving Sisters was born.
And
Yeah.
I love the component about anger, because it's one that in 20, and I'll get the number, 23 years, it was 23 years in February. That's the one piece I couldn't fully put away. And it was like, I didn't want to be angry, but it was the protection element
Right.
that
Right.
kind of sat there, which is, I'm never going to get the answers. And because I can't get the answers, I'll just continue to hold this little nugget of
Right.
anger that sits in the heart of things. But as kind of peeling some of those pieces away, and for listeners, I don't even know if I fully shared with them my losses, which was my dad. And on the same day that my dad died after a cancer battle, I miscarried a
Mm.
pregnancy that had resulted from a sexual assault. And I was 18. I
So
just turned
sorry about
18.
Gosh.
So I had a very, very planned loss in a way. He hung on longer than I think anyone honestly expected. And then I had this thing that I hadn't talked to anyone about, and I didn't want it. And it was like a relief moment. And I always joke, my dad, he somehow knew at the end, and he took that was his last gift to take from me. But when I was going through that and people would say, how are you?
that
And
was
I was
me
like, I
too.
don't even know how to answer that question. Because I can talk about one of my losses, but I can't talk about the other one. And I know folks that have gone through more complicated loss situations, in a sense that they're situations people don't always understand. And suicide falls into that bucket, drug overdoses, or they're looked at historically with stigma, get different rules around
Right.
grief.
Right.
And that, I think, creates a little bit of the how do we identify with each other? And should we identify with each other when we're talking about one loss versus another? Or do we get into the grief
I think
Olympics?
it's easy. It's
And,
very easy to do that
as you
too.
both were navigating
It's
your,
like, well, yeah, I lost my brother. Oh, well, I
yeah,
lost my father. Oh, I lost my dog.
yeah,
Don't do that. Don't do that. Not the dog. Come on.
yeah,
You
Right.
know,
Right.
I get it. Your
Right.
child too, but come on. Not their human life right now at this point.
right. Well, and I think, the
Mhm.
part of holding space, even when you're the one
Right.
experiencing grief too. So, as you two went through something very
Right.
in the same time frame of each other, how did you each navigate having space for allowing the grief, from one of you to the other, and it not becoming just a trade-off of, well, hey, I'm going to give my part and you give your part? Or was there really a moment of just, I'm going to receive, and at some point it'll be my turn to exude and you'll receive for me?
Think for me, Jessica's provided a lot of guidance. She provided a lot of guidance in like the grief walk, because I would feel like I was going crazy at times, and she would let me know that it was normal. Like we always like coin this term of like a grief tunnel. It's like in that first few instances or first couple weeks or months of you um dealing with a loss, you are totally like in this tunnel where time doesn't make sense, and you're trying, and like it's like the whole world keeps moving, but you feel like, oh my god, like how I remember going to the gym for the first time and everything was just so much the same. And for me it was like my life is completely wrecked. My parents are inconsolable. I've lost my only sibling. It was tragic, it was violent. I went to the crash site. She lost her husband in the wreck. Like it was these two families just trying to like grasp at, managing this entire thing, and they were both in the Navy for many years, and the Navy wanted to celebrate them, and it was all between all of these people wanting to celebrate their life, but also us falling apart at the same time. And I would just feel like I was going crazy at certain times and just really was like, yeah, you're in this like grief tunnel. Like eventually you're going to find your way out of the tunnel and it's not going to get easier, but it will get a little better to navigate. Um so I think for us it was like, also, I don't think I recognized her loss as a friend in the
Mhm.
way that I should have, because you really don't know what it's like until it happens, especially when it comes to your younger siblings, because you're just like, you plan for your grandmother. You don't really plan for your parents' death, but eventually they're meant to go before you. Your grandparents are to go before you. All of these aunts and uncles and older people in your family, you understand death in the sense that it'll probably come sooner for them. You never ever ever imagine that your younger sibling who's like just starting their life out is tragically going to lose their lives in an accident, or even for Jess, like her brother choked to death at work. It was like the most freak accident. So you can't wrap your head around these things. Um, but I think us having the support system of being like, I get it. I get it, like, I
Mhm.
would have some days where I'm just like, "I can't stop crying," or, "I feel this way," and I would always she's very busy, she has a toddler, she has, she's an entrepreneur, she has her own career, and she manages her own schedule, and I always, like, try to remind her on those tough days, like, definitely, like, hold space for yourself, be easy on yourself. Like, it can get very easy when you have kids, because 'cause we're both moms, to sort of wrap ourselves in our parental duties and not really make space for ourselves, because it's true, it's
Mhm.
like, you can be so stressed and your kids still need stuff, or there's still responsibilities, and there's, dance classes and games and things like that, and you're just like, "Yeah, I would love to take this day to kinda just be in my feelings and understand what I'm feeling, but I have this responsibility of a parent and I have to keep going." And it's like, I get it. I have 2 teens. They're not typically as needy as toddlers, but there's other things. I always say like little kids, little problems, big kids, big
Mhm.
problems. So there's always these sorts of things that we're trying to, like, figure out and navigate, but I think we do a good job of reminding each other, like, "Be easy with yourself, be soft with yourself," like, when the kids go to bed, do something you wanna do, or, we always try to meet early before we're, doing the podcast to even catch up, and,
Mhm.
lately, I've been trying to talk to her about more things that are not pod related, just to have that break of, like, we have our mission, but we're also,
Mhm.
like, human and moms and grieving people, and try to kinda navigate that way.
So one of the things we were chatting about is the component of life having to go on. And you have, especially when there's children or there's others who are relying, you both talked about having to plan the funerals and the memorials and things like that. And it's I guess I'm interested in your insights on, does society give us space to truly grieve, even if there are things that you can't really avoid in some instances? And we're all shaking our head no.
Absolutely
No.
not. I mean, well, you could start, for me, was like the workplace. For me, my brother passed. I only used 4 days out of the 5 days of my bereavement because there was just so much work that I had to do. Um, and then there was some politics things that needed to happen. I was just like, I'm not in the headspace to talk to people. I don't want to talk to people. You're lucky I'm even showing up to work at this point. Um, and it's like they just wanted you to get back to it like immediately with work. I've discussed this with Liz. Like there were some friends that expected me to be like the life of the party, and they were really holding on to the old me, and was like, "Oh, no, 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 no. Like your grief is too heavy." Like, nope. And I shared this a couple of times in a few episodes, and I hate to keep dragging it, right? But she said to me 6 months into my grieving, "Listen, death is the inevitable." Like essentially, like, and she was my best friend. And but when someone says that to you, it's like you have no idea, and eventually you will have an idea because you have a sibling, you have parents, it's the day's going to come, but don't come over here, because remember, death is the inevitable, and
Right.
keep that in the back of your mind when you need someone to talk to. But yeah, no, I mean, I do, with your question about society. No, they don't care. They just want you to go back to normal.
Yeah.
They don't want you to, it's not that they don't want you to grieve. They want you to grieve in private, and they feel like don't bring it to the forefront. Like we don't want to see
Not
it because
only
we don't want
that,
to
but,
deal.
like, me and Jess have talked about how if you look at your company's policy, the chances are that they give you more time for jury duty than they do for bereavement.
Yeah.
It's typically a work week for jury duty, either 5 to 7 days, and bereavement is typically 4 days. And in my case, I lost my sister and my brother-in-law at the same time. So it was 2 memorials, 2 funerals, 2 not only that, but their bodies were in North Carolina, and we're all from Jersey. So it was like we had to do the transport, and that's like, it's not consecutive days. It's a couple days here, a couple days there, a couple days after. I mean, it was a total when my sister had passed, I didn't bury her for 3 weeks.
Right.
So it's like they give you some time off for funerals or things like that, but it's like, yeah, I can't lump in grieving, the
No, you're
logistics.
you're in survival at this point,
Yeah, it's like it's
both of
gonna
them.
be spread apart over a month, if not
Mhm.
longer, and I just think it's really hard. We have an episode of Grief in the Workplace, which I wish I could have printed and sent out to the entire company because it's true. It's just that people don't really get it. They don't get it. They don't get
Mhm.
it. It's
Well, and
it's
even
yeah.
rules on who you're allowed to use that bereavement for, so
Right, like,
often, you
oh,
know?
immediate family, it can't be extended family, it can't be what? Oh, so for your in-laws, you only for the school, for your in-laws, you get 3
3
days?
days maybe,
3
yeah.
days, and then for your immediate family, you get 5 days.
Yeah, and when my stepdad died, my mom had not married him, and so I'm trying to explain, you know, what this loss is, and and okay, and I didn't need a lot of time, but I questioned. I said, "Am I allowed to use bereavement time for this?"
Right.
I was like, "I don't have anything that shows like we're actually related or even through
Right.
marriage," and they didn't
Mhm.
question it. But like, we
Thankfully.
shouldn't be in a world if you've gone through a loss and you said, "I've lost someone,
I need
I
some
need
time.
time and space," right?
Yeah.
Also accommodating work from home. It's
Mhm.
People have made it so many companies have made it seem like it's, not viable, and COVID proved that it was,
Prove that.
you know
Mhm.
what
Yep.
I mean? So it's like if I can get my work, yes, maybe it's really hard for me to get up and brush my teeth and get dressed for work and look work appropriate, but if you can just allow me to open a laptop and work from home for a week, just so that if I need to, cry in the middle, I mean, sometimes it'll hit you in the middle of the day. So many times me and my mom have been working and we'll get a call from the attorney or from the car insurance agency or whatever is related in a vehicular death. I mean, there's so
Right.
many components. You're not prepared to take that phone call. But if I'm home and I'm able to have that phone call in peace, and if I get emotional, I get emotional, they can come back to the laptop. I really do feel like all companies should have a bereavement policy where they give an adequate amount of days and an adequate amount of work from home accommodation.
Absolutely, I agree.
Because by the time I get ready, get in the car, drive to work, see 100 trucks on my way to work, which is how my sister passed by being hit by a truck, getting to my desk. I mean, this is what my therapist said. She was like, "You need to find a job where you're not doing this sort of driving, you're not on the highway because you're traumatizing yourself on the way to work, and then you're expected to just be in sales. Like,
Right.
in what world?
Impossible.
Well, that and like you said, it hits you out of nowhere. So it could be you're halfway through your day and something comes up. I mean, think songs, anything like that, and it's just
Yeah.
like, nope, I'm done for today. Like it's not going to
Exactly.
happen. And right now it's like, well, do you put that in sick leave? Do you take personal time? Like, how do you even navigate being able to step away for your own sake to be a better person in the long run by
Yeah.
tackling or giving yourself, as you guys have said, the grace and the space to, just feel what that is at that time.
Yeah. And I also think too, like they are, just I like what you said that there should really be a whole like just sector just for that because it's just very important. It is very, very important, especially if you want a worker, you want a worker bee. Do you want them to be
Yeah, from a
110%?
productivity standpoint, this person is not going to do good
Mhm.
quality work if they're being forced to be here. And honestly, if companies implemented these kind of policies, how often are people going to use it? I mean, these
Right.
sort of deaths don't happen like every 5 minutes. Maybe you'll have a couple coworkers that have these tragedies or things like that. I mean, I have a friend whose both parents got cancer at the same time. The mom got a breast cancer diagnosis. The dad got a throat cancer diagnosis. And she's trying to be there for both parents. And her job was not understanding. And it was like, I'm sorry that you have to accommodate me, but the odds of this happening with another colleague or things like that are slim to none. So
Mhm.
I just feel like they should be open. It's like maternity leave policies. Not everybody takes them. Not everybody has kids. Not everybody, it just you have policies in place so that if the worst happens or things need to happen. This is life. You're not working with robots. You're working with actual people.
So we were talking about the role of society not really giving us space. We're getting into then holidays and spaces, and just you were talking about, hey, when those come up, celebrating what
Mhm.
that life. So love for just hopefully we're having tech issues on the side here, so if things seem a little kind of parsed together, it's we're working with what we got. But
Yeah.
what other thoughts on that from either of you?
Liz, you can go ahead on that one.
Repeat the question again. Sorry.
So, like when holidays and Liz, for you, it's really new, right? So you're going through your first round of first Christmas, first birthdays, first New Year's, all of those pieces, and that experience is different for a lot of people. But
It
what's it been
really
like?
is. It really is. And I think what we've tried to do is there are certain holidays that we're just like we don't want to participate in. So for us, I think because it's so fresh, Thanksgiving doesn't work for us. We just kind of like not make it a really big holiday. But for Christmas, it's a huge holiday for us, especially Christmas Eve. So what we've done this first year is we've implemented, and we have a whole episode on this with grief in the
Grieving
holiday.
holidays. Mhm.
So what we implemented was I typically host, and I told everyone to bring an ornament that reminds them of those that we lost,
Mhm.
so that at least instead of going through a holiday pretending that this person, like, it doesn't exist or does or isn't, you know what I mean? Like, they're not a part of it. Or finding a moment where you're getting really upset because you're like, I just wish this person was here. It's sort of like, hey, before we open any of our gifts or before we eat or whatever, like some portion of the night, we'll say like, "Hey, let's all open the ornaments and put it on the tree," and it becomes sort of like a decorating. And
Right.
I said, "Don't say like nobody say what ornament they got or why they got it." So it happened to be like a certain ornament that reminded of the last movie we all went to see together, or something that because people um you have certain things between certain family members. So something that
Mhm.
was special between me and my sister could be very special between my aunt and my sister. So I think that that's just a really good thing to implement. And then there's holidays like New Year's Eve where it's like she was the life of the party, and without her, it's just not the same. So we're not going to pretend that it's the same. So I just think it's kind of knowing your capacity, and then also when you do have a
Right.
capacity for it, to try and make the moment special.
And it was funny, this was a little later, it was one of the closing things, but it fits perfectly here, so I'm gonna use our ADHD superpowers and pull it up.
Yeah.
Collateral Beauty, with Will Smith has been one of the movies that, 1, I cry ugly, ugly tears every time I see it, but that component of there can still be beauty. It's not always these, dark, deep moments of
Fine.
being in quicksand, but you see the butterfly and you're like, "Oh, that reminds me." I remember one of the episodes you guys talked about the power of
Wow.
numbers, and I that hit me because my dad was born on 9/11, he died on 2/11, and I'm like, 11s are always everywhere, you know? So, there's moments of that, and sometimes I I know I have battled with a little bit of shame and guilt and be like,
Oh,
I shouldn't laugh at this. I shouldn't find,
We
comfort in
oh,
love
this.
like
it.
dark
Give it
humor. We love
give
that.
it to me
Oh,
every
yes,
week.
dark
Love
humor.
that.
Mhm. So, and I think that goes back to different ways to grieve, right? So, you guys have mentioned dark humor. It's one of my favorite things to touch on. What is have you used some of those, coping mechanisms along the way and felt good with it, like not having to explain? I always, when I crack a joke sometimes about someone with cancer, and I'm like, no, I lived with it for 3 years. Like I
That's
sat there
it.
and watched it.
It's really about the
And
audience. That's what I
it
feel.
does depend on the audience,
Because some people, they just won't
but
get it.
uh, how do you? So how do you, yeah, uncover those moments where I guess it's okay to support each other in that moment of, we're not gonna be sad right now. Like, "Hey, you're not sad. I don't need to be sad." We don't have to have someone sad in the room during this component, but have you found instances like that where that, is something that, provides some relief, provides some coping along the way?
Think keeping the jokes that you had with the person who passed. I think it's a really important
They
thing
were
that,
clowns.
like,
Yeah.
if this like, our both of our younger siblings were, like, goofballs. Like,
Mhm.
they were so silly. They were so silly, they were clowns, they didn't care, like, they just were, like, really funny. So, I think, like, keeping those inside jokes or sharing stupid things they did or funny things they did. I feel like for me, my sister's friends are becoming more and more comfortable,
Right.
like, sharing funny moments. Like, and I'm always like, "Oh my god, thank you for telling me this." I think that that's important too. It's like, if you know somebody who's grieving and you have, like, a funny moment with that person, like, don't be afraid to talk about it. Definitely be like, "Oh my god, one time this happened and that happened," and you're like, "Oh my god," like, stories that you didn't know, a funny mug they used to use that you didn't know, like, I went and I found, a mug from my sister's, cabinet when I was cleaning out her house, and it was like, "Are you a scientist?" And it was check marks and it said, "Yes," "No," and the last one was, "Bitch, I might be," right? And I thought it was the funniest thing ever because she was a doctor, and I found it so funny, and I ended up posting a picture of it,
Wow.
and one of her colleagues was like, "She used this mug every day at work. She had it during clinic, we always had it. It always made us laugh. It was something that always made us laugh and smile when she would have her coffee mug." I didn't even think she used it. It was in the back of her cabinet, but I guess, it was a mug that she used every day, and I'm like, "Thank you so much." I said, "I always wonder if I should post certain things about her, and then when these stories come up or these little funny instances, I'm like, I'm so glad you guys are telling me this." Like, I'm sure for Just, like, people have funny moments with Shawnee, like, you wanna hear that all the time, like, because it doesn't have to always be like, "Let's cry over these people," but let's celebrate who they were at their core.
Well, friends, you may have noticed there was a lot of kind of goofiness with the little tech pieces on that amazing initial conversation with the Grieving Sisters. Just wanted to let you know they're coming back. We're not done with this discussion just yet. So, if anything resonated with you today, up through when we were starting to talk about dark humor and how we just really grasp those stories that others can tell us about the person that we've lost, but we may not have gotten to experience that side of them, Well, you'll want to stick around. We've still got a couple more things to chat about. Jessica and Liz will be back and we will wrap that discussion up. But in the interim, they've got so much on their page and on their pod. So if you're looking for a specific discussion point or component of grief to dive into, go check them out. All of their info is down in the show notes. And I promise you, there's something in there that probably will help if you're struggling with this topic or with a loss. And there's nothing wrong with struggling with loss, by the way. We're going through it. We're all in different stages. We may be all grieving different things, but nonetheless, do remember you're not alone. I hope you'll come back not only for the next part of this discussion, but for other episodes to come that will be on topics all across the board. That's the point of motivation, and that is taking all of these different, maybe feeling disconnected hot messes and understand the high potential that they have in our lives and honestly, in the lives of everyone around us. Thanks again, and can't wait to chat soon.